Hello, my name is John Miller with Internetic. So in this video, we'll be going over QR codes and how they can be useful for your business. Let's start with what's a QR code. QR code is like a barcode but two-dimensional. So a barcode, you can only read it left or right, so one-dimensional. With a QR code, it's two-dimensional, so it can be read actually in any orientation, so backwards, forwards, up, down, left, right, rotated. It doesn't really matter. How that kind of works is with barcodes, it actually uses a laser. So the laser just reads across it, and it picks up the width of each of these little bars here to tell like what value it's looking for. With QR codes, they're actually called what's called optical. So rather than a laser, it uses cameras to pick up the three little eyes here. They're called eyes. To tell what orientation the QR code is and to feed the information to the camera so it can tell what to do with it. Uh, these can actually contain a massive amount of data. In alphanumeric, that means letters, numbers, and characters. They contain about 4,000 characters. That's a lot more than you probably need for most things. And if you had that much data, you probably put it into a database before you put it into a QR code, but it kind of depends on how you're using it. They do have error correction as well, so they can actually be damaged to an extent, and they are still readable. So, like if it's been smudged or written through the marker, or parts been torn off somehow, they will usually still work depending on how much damage has been done. One of the nice things, side effects of that is you can actually put logos into them. So like in the example here, this little QR code we've got, you can actually put a logo into the center of it. So like your company, something that indicates what it's used for. It's like a little email icon to show an email, or a little Twitter icon for tweets, or your own business logo. Because the error correction, that logo will be fine on there. Uh, the most common the most common commercial use for QR codes is actually in the shipping industry. So Amazon, UPS, and FedEx use these extremely heavily for things like this. So you get these little QR codes here. These are read by their sorting machines. And these things obviously go through very quickly because they handle millions of packages a day. So it doesn't care which angle it's in. It's with the optical, it just looks for where the little eyes are here and goes, okay, there's for my orientation, and sends it on through. Outside of that, the most often way they're used is actually by smartphones. So both the major brands being the Android and the iPhones, they both have built-in apps to read that. Usually it's through the camera app. So you pull up your camera app, you point it at a QR code, and it'll say, I see a QR code. And so what do you want to do? You tap on it and lets it do whatever it's going to do. Those are usually only used for websites, but they can do a lot more things, and we'll show that. So real world uses. Bar none, the most common use for a QR code is definitely shipping labels. After that is likely websites. So you see this most often on right now because of the pandemic with the COVID stuff. Menus at food establishments. This is very common use for these because you don't want a menu that is somewhat porous, like with paper, that you have to clean because you can't really clean paper with sanitizer. It just sort of falls apart. So a lot of QR codes I've seen inside like plexiglass. Sandwiches basically. So it's two pieces of plexiglass glued together with a QR code inside it, and you just wipe it down with sanitization stuff. And that's great. Or they put it underneath the glass of the table or on a wall. One I've liked is actually at the Dairy Queen here in Middletown. They basically printed very large QR codes on the outside of the building, said for our menu, because you can't come in, use QR code it and you can look at our menu. So that's a common use these days, just for opening websites. Roadside advertising is one that's, I think, quite clever. So whenever most people come to a stoplight, they're probably going to pull their phone out because they're bored. They got, depending on where you are, 3 to 5 minutes to sit there. So sometimes you see like on the side of the road a bench or a bus stop or a sign that says like, for legal representation, call this person. For something else, call us for whatever, and you'll see a QR code there. So if you're interested, you can very easily hit the camera app on your phone, point at the QR code, and it'll pull up their website so you can review it more. Social media websites, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that, those all work fine with QR codes. So the common use for I see for those are like vets' offices, doctors' offices, places that are services of some variety. So you go in and they do what they're doing. Your vet, you're getting your dogs checked out. You go to the doctor, you're getting yourself checked out. You're going somewhere to get your car worked on or whatever. It's a rate us on our website, give us good ratings on our Facebook. So you have a little icon next to the checkout, so the QR code, you scan it, and you can go in there and say that they gave them 5 stars. Kind of the flip side of that, though, is that if they're not happy, it just makes it easy for them to tell them otherwise, but that's here and there. Outside conference rooms. So you don't see this quite so much anymore, or at the moment at least, but for hotels, for hospitality, for like business conference rooms, as a common way of showing, like, if it's a shared conference room, you'll have a QR code outside that says scan this and see what times these conferences are going through. Scan to see our future conferences. Scan this to see information about what this conference is about, especially with large conventions. So with IT, we usually go downtown and you have like 30 or 40 or 50 exhibitors there in different conference rooms. So you kind of want to know, it's like, what am I looking at here? Is it something that's interesting to me? Is it something I'm going to pass on? What else is in my immediate area? So you can just QR code it, pulls up a website and says, this is what's going on at this time. And it also makes it a bit nicer. So if you print it out, like a list, well, if that schedule changes because something ran over, well, you can reprint it, but that costs money. So a QR code just makes it a bit easier because you just pull up on the phone. You can change that website at will, no real cost, or you can change this there. One of the lesser known uses that is pretty neat is joining Wi-Fi. So this is kind of useful for hotels, for like Starbucks, McDonald's, and Airbnbs. So you can actually have a QR code on a little thing that says we have free Wi-Fi. You point your smartphone at it with the camera app, and it will say join Wi-Fi. Click here or tap here, and actually just join straight in the Wi-Fi. So we can show that in a little bit with our QR code generator here. What that does is when you when you tap on it, it will automatically put in the SSID. That's like the Wi-Fi identifier, and the password and the encryption type, so they don't have to do anything. So that just kind of gets around the issue of, like, does this an O or a zero? Is an I or an L? Or is I fat fingering this because I have gloves on, or something like that? You just point it out and you're good to go. Geocaches, so you can do locations with QR codes. It's also good for like scavenger hunts. So when you get somewhere, you can like point at it and it's going to say your next location is at this latitude, longitude, or it's at this street address. So you can pull it up in Google Maps or the Apple equivalent or something else. Or it's for scavenger hunts, it's kind of nice. You can give the next challenge in that. SMSs, you don't see this used that often, but it is useful for like contests. So say like the Kentucky Fairgrounds, the 99.7 could be running a contest of some sort, and it says text 555 to enter a contest. So rather than having them type in the phone number and type the number in, because people really aren't going to bother with that for the most part, you can just point your phone at it, click on it, it'll automatically open the little text window with this pre-filled, and you just hit send. It just makes that step easier for people, because if it takes 2 or 3 steps, people probably aren't going to bother. There's like, it's not worth my time, I'm going to move on, but they can just walk by, click. And for analytics, that's kind of useful because now you know how people actually looked at your booth with some statistical analysis there, and how much people were interested in what you were trying to give them. You also do just text how we did. If we did a great job, do this and send us a text. It's just a quick way of doing that. Or for like nonprofits, you could have something like in your ads, or in your shop or something like that if you have a storefront. So like Goodwill type of place. It's like, to donate to us, text this number to this phone number, and we get $10. You see that a lot with like late night nonprofit or I guess not advertising then, late night nonprofit requests for donation, or churches and things like that. There's a very easily, if you don't have cash on hand but you want to donate easily, you just point your phone at this, you hit that SMS, and a lot of phone providers will work with you on that. Say, yeah, if they text this number, we will bill them $5 and it goes to you. You can also add contacts to phones. So this is kind of nice for conventions, kind of like an e-business card. So if you're at a convention, when we have conventions again, you have a couple hundred vendors there, you have like a bunch of business cards. You may not, like, I don't want to do all these business cards. So you can have a QR code there that when you walk by, they can say, okay, I don't want to talk to this person, but I'm interested in what they've got. You can just QR code it. It'll automatically add the contact to their phone. Also good for like emergency contacts, or So like if say you run like an Airbnb, you want them to have your contact information in their phone in case something happens at the house. You can just have a little QR code there that says scan this to have our contact added to your phone because they're probably not going to spend the time typing in your name and such into there. But they can just scan it and click go and they have it automatically added to their phone. You'll see that for signs for like professional services, so like lawyers and doctors and things like that. We've recently seen them for COVID cases, like in our own office here. We have a poster that says, if suspicions of COVID, call this number to receive assistance. So he's put on the wall and they can add it to their phone. So anytime they have an issue, it's already in their phone. You scan it and tap it. And so, okay, well, there we go. ID badges, not as common, but in our own case, so like Internetic, sort of see it there. We actually do have QR codes on our badges that actually, in our case, we point back to our website. So if someone says they're with us, you can scan the QR code and it'll send us to your website where we have all of our staff with our faces and everything on there, so you can identify who we are. You also see that used for like biometric identification, so it's like door entry. So you swipe the badge in front of the door has a little reader and says, okay, you are who you claim you are, ish. Um, MFA, so MFA is multi-factor authentication. So, and it's also called two-factor authentication. So 2FA, MFA, that's when you go to a website or a service or an app of some sort and it says username, password, and usually a 6-digit code. Uh, that is part of MFA, 2FA. So how you usually set those up is it'll say username, password, and say, okay, we need to set up your 2FA now. And it'll show a QR code on the screen. You open up your authentication app, you scan that code, and it will automatically generate that. So you give them the 6-digit code. It's just a good way of protecting you for it's called a TOTP, or a one-time use password, time-based one-time use password. The idea is username and passwords can be out in the wild. They can be compromised, but a 2FA is only available for generally 30 seconds. So even if someone gets your 6-digit code, is only good for 30 seconds, then it expires and rolls onto a new one. You used to see that with the little, they're called RSA keys, like a little key fob on. You would see it has like a little gray key fob, a little LCD screen. And you go to a bank website, a stock website, usually financial institutions will use these, where you would log in, say, give us your code, you type your 6 digits in, and you're good. So let's actually generate a code. So my preference is qrcode-monkey.com, so QR code monkey. I like this one because it gives you a lot of options and it's free, though free is good for this. So the most common use is the URL. So that is a web address. So we'll go over to my own website. We'll pull that address out of the address bar, put it into the URL here, and create QR code. There's our QR code. I always recommend higher quality just because it makes it easier for printing out things. Also, if you're going to put it into publication or make it larger, so like this case on my screen, it's about 2 inches by 2 inches. That's pretty good because shrinking it will work fine. And when you try to blow it up, it becomes just stretched. It looks weird. It doesn't look very professional. That's the problem we have. The Dairy Queen one up the road here is they took a small one and blew it up. You can tell it got blew up just because it looks like it lost resolution. It's been stretched. It looks just doesn't look very good. What we do is called vector graphics. So SVG and EPS. What that makes it a pixel perfect vector. So rather than just being stretching it, it actually does some mathematical things so that you can make it an inch, a foot, 10 feet, 100 feet. It doesn't matter. It will always look pixel perfect. So it just lets you scale this thing up very easily for large scale printing without any loss of quality. So I definitely recommend that. For ease of use, for day-to-day things like putting on your website, putting in a brochure, PNG works great for that. For publication, for special publication, for like magazines, for newspaper, for anything in print, I would definitely recommend vector graphics just because they're going to want that. So we have our URL put in here. So you actually can do colors as long as the contrast is there. So you don't want like white on white, gray on white, something like that. You want something that contrasts well so the camera can very easily tell what you're looking at or what it's looking at. You can add that in there. So if you're printing onto a black paper, you're going to want white. If you're printing onto white paper, you want black. So you can add a logo. That's kind of a nice thing with the error correction there. In this case, I've already got my logo up here, so let's grab that. So I'm going to remove background behind the logo. What this does is it puts a white behind the logo. That kind of helps with just sort of bleed through. So we'll show without that. So without that white behind it, it just kind of makes it hard to see what's going on with the logo. It kind of confuses the QR code as well. So I usually recommend that. It won't hurt the QR code's readability with the error correction. It's fine with that. At least on this website, you can actually do a lot of other built-in ones. So like maybe I know this is going to be used as an email, so I'm going to put like the Gmail logo on there. This is going to be a Facebook thing, so I'm going to put the little Facebook logo on there. In most cases, I'd say put your own logo if you can have a logo that will fit on there. Because sometimes your logo is probably say Word, and that's not going to show as well on there. But like a Facebook one, obviously, that one's designed to be just a very easily recognizable circle. Netflix would have problems unless they use their in, but Facebook does not in this case. It does give you some customization features here. So with QR codes, it doesn't actually matter what these dots look like as long as they're recognizable as dots. So they can be the cubes or the little squares. They can be dots. They can be these weird little whatever these are. As long as the contrast is there that the system can recognize them as a QR code is good. So the iframe, these are the three dots or three big squares on the outside. That's the orientation in the eyeball, so you can change those how they look and change your various things. This also has the option of text. I don't really see text used very often, so this is what you'd probably use for, say, like UPS would use this. They would have the shipping information, where it's going to, where it's coming from, who's responsible for it in the text of the QR code. For most use, you're not going to really need this. If you're sending text, you're probably going to send it through an SMS or through an email. Email, so what it'll do is you can basically pre-format an email. So when someone QR code scans that, it will automatically open up their email app, be it Outlook or Gmail or Apple Mail or Android Mail. It'll automatically have where it's going to, the subject and the message in there, so they can just very quickly say send or add something to it. It just makes that pre-formatting a little easier. Phone is more or less to call, and you tap on it, it'll just open the phone app and dial the number in. I really don't see that used because it's just easy to have a phone number, and it's more easily recognizable as like on your business card, you would have the phone number. Because for the average person, I cannot read a QR code without my phone, so I'd rather have the phone number so I can do more with it. But the option is there. SMS, like we said in the PowerPoint there, you can automatically have it pre-format and ready to send a phone number and a text. Take note, it will not send it for you. So that's kind of a security thing in there. It will not just say, scan this and we'll send a text. No, it will pop up the text window with the phone number and message on there, and then they have to hit send. That's just good manners type of thing from security. V cards and me cards, those are just adding contacts to a phone. So if they scan these, it will add the contact to the phone with the confirmation, of course. Location, kind of nice for the geocaching. You can type in an address of some sort, latitude, longitude can be more specific, and give it a QR. So like my own address here. And create a QR code. So it's got that data marked as an address in this QR code. So with QR codes, as we're saying on these others, it is smart to know different protocols. So with Facebook, you can tell very easily this is a Facebook entry. So you can tell it to share or to have a Facebook. So if you type in, it goes straight to Facebook to that page. URLs do the same thing. It just gives that functionality of saying this is specifically a Facebook, so a Facebook app opens rather than just the Facebook website. Same thing with Twitter and with YouTube. It just gives a functionality telling it open the YouTube app, open the Twitter app, rather than saying open the website. If they don't have those installed, it will usually just open the website instead. Wi-Fi, as with Airbnbs and hotels and like Honey Brothers and Starbucks and McDonald's, these are useful. You can type in the wireless SSID, so like guest Wi-Fi and the password and the encryption type. and create QR code. So when they walk in, they can scan it, automatically join onto the Wi-Fi. Events, I never really see this used. I can see it being used like at a Starbucks or like one of those billboard, like the post boards or the punch boards you see in the back of some like restaurants or coffee places where it's like band tryouts at this time at this place. It'd be useful for that. So they can just scan onto the phone and say, okay, I want to go to this. You scan it, automatically adds it to your, well, you tap OK as always, but it adds it to their appointments so they can look at it. Bitcoin, I've never seen this used, but the option is there to do currency exchanges through Bitcoin. Um, I know Venmo, and if you actually do this as well, so some places like Facebook sellers and things like that, well, and like Craigslist, not as much anymore. They will accept Venmo and PayPal. I'm not sure PayPal does, but I know Venmo does. Where if they have a Venmo account, say I bought a bed stand from this person, they can send me their QR code, or I can, when I go to their store, have a QR code, I scan it, I send the money immediately that way. Just make things easier. So let's actually use one of these. So we have our URL entered here. And I'm going to change the logo over to remove logo for this one. We have our QR code. If we scan this, it'll pull up my website. We're going to download PNG. This will spin for a little bit here while it creates your QR code for you. Once it's done, it will put it into a download directory. You can put that wherever you want. In my case, it drops into my downloads directory. So now we have our QR code file. And if we click on it, there's our file. So you can scan it or whatever. If you want to do it on your own phone, yeah, go ahead and you could, I'm gonna leave this up for a couple seconds. So you can scan with your phone and see what it does. So I've got MS Word open here. And I picked up just a very basic template for a brochure of some sort. This is a template, it's not an actual brochure. It looks pretty nice though. But I want to add a QR code to it. So I picked a spot here. That looks good for me. So you can see my little cursor there. Let's insert our QR code. So we go up to here, File, Insert, Pictures, Insert from this device. I got QR code 3 because it's the third variant of this. So you kind of notice it's messed with the text a bit. It's moved everything around. And it's kind of big. So what I want to do is come over here to this little icon for layout options. I'm going to tell it this. So what this does in front of text, it kind of takes it out of it moves out of the picture. So rather than being part of it, so like this text is part of the text. It's kind of hard to describe that. It just takes it out of it so it can move around and float without getting in the way of things. So it just makes it easier to move around without, so like if I move around the picture, it's not going to move everything else around it too. It just makes it a bit easier to not mess with your formatting. So this is a little large, so I'm just going to grab the bottom right of it. I'm going to break it down to somewhat of a more usable state. So even it looks a little blurry with the size, so there are ways of basically resizing these so they look better, but for this use, this will work fine. The QR code app will read this fine. We actually can help you with this sort of thing if you give us a call. We can help you or show you how to resize these so they look more crisp when you make them larger and smaller. Things like the vector graphics do that. For this case, I'm not going to bother with it. I'm just doing a quick demo. So let's do Control P to see what this looks like in print. So it's still a little large, but it gets the point. So we got our brochure of Margie's Travels, and we have our little QR code here. If we scan it, it'll work fine because it still has enough contrast and enough crispness, enough resolution for the camera to recognize it. So something we do, I think somewhat clever, is we use a software called Rebrandly. This is free to an extent. They do have paid versions. We don't pay for it because the stuff that they have in that paid version doesn't really affect us. Like the paid version has things like analytics and more customization. What we do with this is when we make a link, say like in this case goes to Internetic using our QR code, when you make that QR code, it is basically static. So whatever text is in that QR code stays in that QR code. So if you print it into like a manual or you publish it into a magazine, if that web page changes, if that blog goes away, if that event, that convention has expired, has been done, what do you do with that QR code? I mean, it's still out there, still in rotation, it's still potentially marketable, you don't want to go nowhere. I mean, that doesn't do any good. So what we do is we call Rebrandly. What that is a custom URL shortener or relinker. Uh, so instead of it going to here, we will put another link in this that points to Internetic, so that if something changes, we can actually have that. The QR code will still be the same code, but we can tell it when you go to this site to go to this QR code, it will send you somewhere else. So to show how that works, I'm going to click on New Link. So I'm going to actually send it to our blog. So you give this, we actually use a branded domain. That's a free thing as well. We can show you how to set it up if you want. Well, you can also use like the Rebrandly domain. We like to use the branded domain because it tells you who we are. So a lot of people don't trust URL shorteners like Bitly because you don't know where they're going. With links.internet.net, that is hosted on our, that is just a domain pointed to Rebrandly to do this, so people will trust it more. All right, so we've made our link here. So this link, I'm going to copy it. So if I put it into my address bar here, you see it goes over to our blog. So I go over to QR Code Monkey, drop this in, and create a QR code. What this does is, as I said, if my blog changes addresses, we change it to another service, we delete it. We don't want that traffic that's been coming from newspapers, from magazines, from TV, from wherever to go away. We want to redirect it somewhere else. So I can go back over to Rebrandly here and tell it, I don't want that going there anymore. I'm going here now. And it will just do that. So as an example, let's send it over to okay, so we have that same link. See, now instead of going to the blog, it goes to internet.net. It just makes it easier for later on if something changes. You have that flexibility instead of having like you printed this thing, you have to reprint. No, just change that. That's kind of a breakdown of QR codes and how they can be useful for business. We try to come up with new ideas like this all the time. Try to find ways of making it useful to businesses in a cost-effective manner. Uh, if you have any questions or concerns, give us a call, 888-526-1631 or sales@internetic.net. Thank you.